All right, we're live. I'm so excited to be here. Richard, I still remember our first interaction from
Okay.
2023.
Wow.
Honestly, I was not like that embedded in LinkedIn. I was still somewhat of a new founder, and I learned about you from someone that was part of another mastermind that I was part of, and he talked about you, and I remember you reaching out to me too, and I just felt, wow, what a down to earth person, especially for everything that you've accomplished. And honestly, that memory still stays in my head in terms of how um, basically personable you are. Of course, I had to have that playback on LinkedIn. It just shows, how different you are, because whenever someone thinks of a sales expert, they see them as that stereotypical pushy person. And
Yeah.
the first gut reaction is they'll just run away from them.
Yeah.
But you have this amazing ability to really like pull people towards you, which I think is your it factor. So today we were just laughing when you hopped on, this call, and you said, for once, I'm not going to drive and I'm not going to worry about coaching anyone or selling
Exactly.
anyone,
You're
and we're just
leading.
going to
It's
have
all your
fun.
exactly. We can just have fun. Although I have fun on all the calls, to be honest, even the sales calls.
Absolutely.
But yeah, you can lead, and I'm happy to answer things. Thank you. That's a really kind thing to say. But yeah, I mean, the truth is that there are so many people in sales around the world because it's a very accessible thing. If you're willing to go try and you can make money for a company, it makes you valuable because a lot of people don't want to do it. But doing it in an elegant way where you're actually welcomed takes a lot of time and a willingness to go through a lot of hard stuff for sure. I'm sure we'll get into that.
I gotta say though, Richard, I mean, your accent does help make it elevated.
I don't have an accent though. You're the one with the accent, according to me. But yeah, I suppose for some it matters, and for others it doesn't. But yeah, I suppose that is an element of it, depending on where I'm speaking to.
I am pulling your leg. I mean, I do come from a country that has a very like big British influence. So I grew up, understanding the difference, and I just love the British culture.
I'm
But
pleased.
hey, everyone, as you're dropping in, tell us where you're tuning from. Tell us if, what is your biggest frustration when it comes to sales? Uh, wherever you are, whether you're in the corporate world as a professional, there is a need to sell yourself, whether you're an entrepreneur, a business owner, B2B, B2C. We're curious. Drop in the
Yeah.
chat. Would love
And
to
I've
hear
got
from
I've
you.
got the live stream open next to us, so I can see there's a load of questions, which is really, or a load of comments even, which is really really wonderful.
That is
Hello everyone,
awesome.
thank you for joining us.
That is awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for commenting. And I'll apologize in advance that the way LinkedIn is and StreamYard is, sometimes the questions and the responses come in delayed. So just keep in mind. And if you experience any technical difficulties, my best recommendation is to not maximize your screen, refresh your screen, try to exit and come back, and it should sort itself out. Beautiful. So we're not gonna, give you a lecture today because honestly, a lot of people have done this justice, and you should just join Richard's community if you're looking for something that is educational. But really, what I wanted to demonstrate here is Richard's story from his childhood all the way to where he's at today, because there's a lot of misconceptions out there that you need to fit into a particular box in order to be great at sales. And I'm not going to give any spoiler alerts, but Richard had a very non typical career trajectory into sales. And so that is going to build your confidence and make you believe that this is possible for you to become a great salesperson in a non salesy way, but in a very authentic way that prioritizes you helping people and connecting with them. Amazing. So, Richard, I'm just going to go all the way back, and I'm going to
Okay.
go back into your childhood. I read that you weren't the loudest person in the room, and you were the
No.
kind of child that spent more time observing rather than speaking. Tell us a
Hmm.
little bit more about that.
Well, it's very accurate. Probably because I said it, I suppose. Yeah. So I was always a bit shy, and socially, I was not the center of attention. I was definitely one who observed how others interacted. I've always been a detail person in terms of how, like, the nuance of how people interact. I really pick up on inflections or body language and things like that. And I don't write it down, and it's not conscious, but I'm always very aware of that kind of thing. And I think when I was at school, I was a good student, I was a good boy, and all that kind of thing. I was disciplined. But one thing that I think was a really interesting marker in my younger life was so we moved house twice. I moved when I was 6, and I moved when I was 13. And when I was 13, I was going into I was in secondary school, and at that kind of age, teenagers, like, they've got their social groups and things like that. And moving into a brand new area with no friends, new school, when everyone's at the kind of the age where they're like, we've got our friends, thank you, and we, that was hard.
Yeah.
And I remember I was put in that first day with someone who would look after me. This guy was called Ben, and I remember he introduced me to his friends, and he was a good boy, so he looked after me. But what was interesting is that his friends were like my people perfectly, because they were all massive geeks for computers, because this was the early mid 90s, Nada, and so you had a lot of like early coding, like internet was just like not really happening at quite that point. And it was much more like building computers and things like that was something that we all happened to be into. And so my memory, if I kind of put it all into one image, my memory is as a teenager being around these new people who just felt so right for me. At lunchtimes, I remember now, I can see it, like you had the IT lab, and you've got everyone outside on the field playing, football and stuff like that, and all like that kind of energy. And me and 3 or 4 people are indoors, and I'm like coding my first operating system. We're like trying to build this computer and things like that. And that just made me so happy. And I'm bringing it up because it was really good that I didn't choose to do what other people suggested I should do, and go with the mainstream. I just wanted to play with these guys at this thing. And I didn't get much sunlight at that age, and I in the summer holidays I would ride around my friend's house, and one of their mums would take us to like a computer fair, and like proper geekiness, and we loved it, and that's all that mattered. And I think that gave me a lot of love for like the internet and computers and things like that. But I was very I wasn't confident socially, but I was good with those people. And I was a late bloomer to like, when I was like 14, I didn't have girlfriends. That happened a few years later. And so going out and socializing, and when I was like 17, 18, 19 years old, going to nightclubs or bars and things, I would be racked with anxiety. So, you'd have a few drinks before, and you'd go out and things like that. And I would be like often sick because I was so anxious about being around people socially. Yeah. And, like people like, oh, have a few drinks and you'll loosen up. But I would just often just be too nervous. And it was a really hard thing for me. And so then going into university, I started to kind of find myself a bit, because prior to university, my end of secondary school or high school, as you call it, exams, I completely flunked. So we have exams when we're like 15, 16, and then we have exams when you're 17, 18. The 15, 16-year-old ones, I aced them all. But then I started getting in my head more and more, because of course, when you're 17 or 18 years old, like social matters to people so much, and identity matters to people a lot. And I really frankly felt like I was probably falling behind a bit. And so I put a lot of pressure on myself to do well in my exams, and I didn't, because I was trying to like muddle along socially, and it was all just a very difficult time. So because I didn't do well at those exams, my A levels, I then went to quite an average university for my bachelor's degree. But in that first year, there was a tutor of Irish history called Elizabeth Hurren. And I remember she called me into her office once, and this would have been like the end of the start of the year 2000, actually. and she was like, why don't we talk about like your mindset and how, like, what's
Wow.
going on here? Because, no one has spoken to me about this. And remember, this is this is 20 plus years ago. This just wasn't talked about. And I recalled that in my exams to get there, I'd had to leave one of the exams because I was needing to throw up with a nerve. And it was about, she talked to me about some actual techniques that would help me to like believe in myself, because I was a good student, but I got in my head when it came to exams. And what's so interesting is that I then came top of the year for history. And I just found myself becoming more of a new kind of person. And I stepped into being a bit more confident. And I was like, I'll be the representative for history, and I'll do this and I'll do that. And I ended up being a student rep for like what we called the Senate at my next university. And just kind of, it was amazing how I tapped into some confidence with her. And then that helped me socially. And then things started to snowball a bit. So that helped me a bit.
Yeah.
But didn't half help me as much as sales did when I did that as a job.
It sounds like that was one of your pivotal moments. You being a shy kid, that's so relatable to a lot of people, because I bet a lot of people before they get on a sales call, their heart is racing, because it requires a level of intimacy, like getting to know someone.
Yes.
There's a little bit of vulnerability there, because in a way there might be rejection, if there isn't that alignment. And so you had that, that anxiety, like almost like a performance anxiety, was it?
Indeed. And I think that was certainly the case when I started selling as well. But what's interesting is just like with anything, reps will get you there. And, my mother very much pushed into my sisters and I this idea that if you choose a path, you don't get to quit on it. You have to push through and make it happen. And, that the first job I got was like, it was the first interview I took. And I took that job because I had to have a job, because I didn't get funding for my PhD, because I wanted to stay in academia, Nada. I wanted to write books, lecture, and be at universities. That was going to be the career. And so I had to get a job. And I was like, oh, what am I doing? And even I remember close family were like, why have you picked this cold calling sales job? It doesn't seem aligned. And there was also this view 25 or 20 odd years ago of like, if you've gone to university and got degrees in like history at master's level, and you were potentially going higher there, like it was seen as this lowly job.
Absolutely.
And it was like, why have you gone and got a sales job? Like, what even is that? Like, as if I'd let myself down. So that was quite hard to contend with. That
must have been hard for you.
I wasn't allowed, but I definitely had this kind of this belief of like, well, I don't get to quit. So if you can't quit, you either have a horrible time or you go fix it. And a willingness to push through the hard stuff really does matter. And that's where I think I was always off to a good start, because I was really interested in the people and the breaking the code of understanding the code of how it all works, rather than I mean, don't get me wrong, it was nice making money, but I wasn't just doing it for the money. I really found it stimulating, understanding what this interaction would be like between me and a business leader, but also navigating. I found it really interesting, navigating my emotions and how I felt. And I was like, yeah, I'm sweaty and nervous and scared, but like a little less than last time. And I started becoming quite natural to it, because the job was, you can't even sit down. You just dial all day long. That was your job. And like, just go nonstop. And so exposure therapy, I suppose, is what helped me a lot.
Wow. That's so powerful. I am curious. What was your parents' career path? Was your mom a teacher, or did I get that wrong?
Yeah. So both parents were teachers in their younger years.
And so you were expected to follow, the path.
Yeah. So they were both very strict. They broke up when I was 11. So I never saw my father again for 25 years. So there was no interaction at all. But he was originally a physics teacher, but then he was an engineer. So he worked for like big defense businesses and things like that. And like, but he went off, that was the thing. But he was incredibly strict. And my mum was like, rod of iron kind of strict. But even though it was primary school teaching, she was very, very strict. But so her attitude, I've said this a lot in interviews, her attitude was never try your best. Her attitude was be the best.
Wow.
And that's hard when you're a child because it sets you up for a fall if you don't make it, but it does promote excellence. And it was very much, I've had enough therapy to be able to talk about this. It was a product.
I don't mean this to be a therapy session. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I've had enough of it anyways. But like there was basically, you can imagine if there's an awful breakup, you need to rebuild yourself. And so there was this kind of, steel shield she put around her of like, I can do whatever. I can raise 3 children and put them through university on my own. And she couldn't drive, and she had a part-time job, an absolute hero, and she didn't complain. She just went and made it happen. So you can see where that kind of attitude really came from. I totally see that. And she was like, it was very much, you need to go and be independent and make it on your own and don't rely on anyone. And she was hurting and it was bitter to a degree, but at the same time, it's in hindsight, it was a wonderful gift to have a mother who pushed me in that way. There are times I'm like, I just want to be excused from the hard work. I just want to be like, you know what, it's okay. But, and of course there are times when she's like, you're all good, it's fine. But she did push excellence. And that really, I really love that. And, both my sisters are incredibly successful, and they're the breadwinners for their family too. And I'm just so proud of them. And we've come, I'd like to think, quite a long way because of a lot of how we were raised. So, having my mum in my corner meant a lot in those early years because I had her in my head as well, if that makes sense.
I can definitely relate to that, Richard. Even though I come from a different culture, there's still that similarity and expectation that you need to be disciplined and work hard. Coming from the Middle East, I think a lot of people are going to relate to this. You're either a doctor, an engineer, or a disappointment, basically.
Yeah.
And I was resentful at the beginning because I felt, oh my God, I don't want to go into software engineering, but I don't really enjoy, this is a lot of work. This requires a lot of, studying. And I don't even know if I'm going to be an engineer. But in hindsight, if I hadn't gone through that path, I wouldn't be working with people in tech. Am I an engineer right now? No, but I understand how engineers think. And that is why I'm able to help them. So I am curious, though. I understand there was a little bit of that expectation to go into academia, but why history? Was that your choosing, or was it a coincidence?
That was my choosing. My older sister did biochemistry. I did history. My younger sister did English. So it was down to what we're into. The thing is, like, this prior to university, I chose my 3 subjects, and I was like, I don't know. The ones I did before, I got A's in them all. So I'll pick the ones I enjoyed. And I stupidly picked chemistry and physics. Chemistry at A level is basically maths.
Oh, yeah.
and history, because I enjoyed it and was good at it. Both my cousins, who are chaps who are older than me, they're very dear to me. We're very, very close. And they were very much, without a father figure as well, and without brothers, they were like, they filled that void, and they both did history. And that's because my uncle, their father, was very into history too. And he and I would, and we still do, we would always like have long conversations about, wars and history and stuff. And they were like, oh God, Dad's talking about history again. I'm like, I love it. It's really interesting. So it was just kind of what I was into. And, I just liked it, and I got it. And I think the people poo-poo degrees a lot. Universities get a bad rep, and that's true for a lot of subjects are completely superfluous and don't need to be done at university level. A lot of subjects really do. I mean, you've talked about being a lawyer, for instance. You better go and learn at that level, otherwise you're not necessarily going to get around being a lawyer very well. Same with medicine and so on. What I love about history is that it's not about learning about kings and queens. That's just the vehicle. It's about critical thinking, and at master's level and beyond. I was very fortunate at Warwick that it was master's, postgrad degrees, and like PhDs and all that, we were all together. So there was a lot of like asking yourself, well, here's what people think, here's the counter argument, but like, is there another way? And like considering all different angles and things. And I feel that that helped me a lot with thinking on my feet, because a lot of debate was what we were doing. And so practically, that was an incredible subject to do. You know, and I used it a lot in business, because in selling, it was live and I was on that call right then, and I had to think fast and I had to reason with someone or understand their point of view and then put my own in. So I found that actually tactically really useful.
That's such a great insight, because I've worked with a lot of, people in academia, and they've always wondered how their skills could translate to other professions. And so, hey, here's a hint. Sales
Exactly.
could be a great,
It's good critical
pathway.
thinking. You're quite right. And like, yeah, I mean, there's no surprise that people who do history often become accountants, for instance, and things like that, because of the way they're thinking at things. But I liked it because I'm an art student. I'm not a science person, and so I liked that I could be creative and write, but I didn't want to do full tilt English, because I was never a big reader, despite what you can see behind you. That kind of thing changed, but I love being a student and learning. But my head was always in a non-fiction book. And so I can be creative and write essays and think, rather than have specific definite answers, which you get more in the sciences and maths, and that worked for me. So there's a lot in a subject like history. So I'm a big fan of it.
That's amazing. So it sounds like you had an all lost moment when you didn't get the funding that you needed to pursue or to continue your PhD. And that made you want to just get a job, right? In order to pay the bills. Tell us, how did that feel?
I happened to get that, because that's sadly not what happened.
What happened?
So specifically, I didn't want to get a job. I wanted to do my PhD. I loved drinking red wine at 2 PM and theorizing about stuff with my friends at the bar, because we were all, really pretentious students. That was really good fun. I wanted to do that.
Yeah.
But what happened was my hand was forced, because my mum said, just so you know, you're not coming home, by the way. I was like, what do you mean? She said, obviously, if you had to, you could come back home, but like, go get a job. Come on, like, you're a grown up now. And
wow.
So it was like, so where are you going to live? Well, I slept on my sister's sofa in her house for 2 weeks while I was looking for a place to live in London, whilst I got this job. And I was just like, I remember I handed in my thesis early because I had to start this job, and I was just like, let's get started. So it wasn't because I wanted the job, it was because I had to get the job.
You had to.
Because my mum was a big fan of not bailing you out. If you had to, then fine. But otherwise, she was like, I'm not going to bail you out, go get it, because that's what she did. And that kind of push seems mean, but I love that it was like an emergency safety net, but not a safety net just all the time. And it really taught me to like grow up and be a grown up. And you're not a grown up when you're 18. Oh, so when you're 20, 23, but treating me like a grown up like that. And again, in hindsight, I complained a lot at the time, Nada, but in hindsight, I'm like so thrilled she treated me that way, rather than here's some more money. Is like, go get on with it and go fix the problem then. Come on, you're a grown up. You act all grown up, so be one as well,
But Richard, out of all of those jobs though, was that again a coincidence that you picked, a basically cold calling, a position? Because it could have been anything. It could have been customer experience. It could have been so many other things. Why that job in particular?
Well, the reason why I think that one got my eye. So it was the first interview I went for, and the first job I applied for. It was, you see these laughable LinkedIn posts, I've been rejected from 400 jobs. It's like, how bad is your cover letter?
Oh man, Richard, don't.
And did you not learn? Did you not learn after, 30? Like hundreds of it. So I sent one CV to one job and and to be fair, it was cold calling. So they're like, do you have a pulse? Do you like money? Okay, you got a job. Like, when do you start? So it wasn't the hardest one. But we had to do a role play and all that kind of thing. And,
Yeah.
you know, I just think it was one of those things where it was like, what could I do? And I looked at like a load of different things. I had originally applied for like the fast stream for the civil service. So like that's like senior leadership in government when I was at university. And I went through the process of that. And I did the same for the NHS, which would have been ultimately to fast track me to like run a hospital as like a general manager. But I was quite advanced, but I was like, I don't want to do this. Why am I doing this? And it was because everyone else when you're a student was kind of going for those kind of jobs, you know, in like big four accountancy businesses and like, you know, finance jobs and things like that. But the reason why I applied for that one was because it was focused on the internet. And I was a bit of a geek for that.
Oh.
And they started in 1996.
Wow.
And they were selling internet marketing on web portals. And they were like this plucky little part of this bigger business that happened to have got through the dot-com bubble burst. And people are like, hey, there's actually money to be made by advertising and promoting yourself online. So I took the job in October 2003. So that's 21 years ago. And it was so interesting, you know, because I was just like, oh, I get to be on the internet stuff. And we were in this little corner that worked on web related selling. And everyone's like, oh my God, look at this lot. Because they were all selling print adverts in trade publications. And they were making, you know, 8 grand, 10 grand for an advert on a half page of a magazine. And we were trying to get 3 grand for a year on this portal. And it was just interesting. Kind of the subject was interesting. And it was on, you know, it was on heavy industry. So like shipbuilding and the military and oil and gas. And so it was interesting topics, just something to get my teeth into. And you know, like it didn't take long. I was the first of the cohort to get a sale. So there was 17 of us who joined, I remember. And we had training the first week. And then there was me and this other woman I'll never forget called Nikki. She was from Greece. And we were like the 2 competitive ones in our training group. And they had new training groups every 2 weeks because of the amount of churn. Everyone was just leaving the job because it was hardcore. And we were like, I'll get the first sale. I got the first sale. And I got the first one in the first week on the floor. On the Friday, it was a Dutch company, paid 1,700 euros. And I'll never forget the deal came in and I was like, I loved it. And I didn't make loads of commission. I made a bit, but I got this kind of back of the net feeling, you know, like I'd scored a goal and I was like, wow, this is brilliant. And then the next week I did a 6 grand deal also with a Dutch company. And I remember that deal, it paid me because I had a thing called an accelerator, which is a weird thing given I run an accelerator now.
Yeah.
They had
so many like coincidences.
I know, it's so many
signs now that they're adding up.
but like basically every 2 weeks, if you hit a certain amount of, I think it was 7,000, would have been 7,000 quid, then you get everything at 15%. That was the commission. So I had like 1,000 quid of commission. It was just amazing. And I remember swaggering around London, like at the end of that month, like I owned the place.
I mean, I can imagine you in your 20s and making, or back then, making that much money.
It blew my mind. It blew my mind because you've got to remember, I would work all summer in the pub back home to make enough money to go out a bit and see friends, but otherwise to make money to pay off my tuition fees.
Wow.
And now suddenly I'm being handed a check. We were paid weekly as well. Given a check, and I was like, I could just make money, and it was amazing because that's when it started. I was like, I instantly couldn't understand why people would be paid a salary and nothing else. I was like, my manager was always like, if you want more money, so go get it. And that's what's so exciting about it. And I basically, it didn't take long. It was a few months where I was like, I still have designs on going back and reapplying for the PhD. But then after a while, it was just like, it's so seductive because I was like, I can really do this. And I'm making more money than I thought I ever would. And I was really enjoying that. So it kind of sucked me in. And it wasn't all about money. It was about London. And I fell in love with London and all of its it's still the best place in the world. It's just so amazing, all of the different things you can do. And if you have a little bit of money when you're 23, you can go and enjoy all the things it has to offer. So I soon fell in love with a very different trajectory. And now I'm 44 and like it hasn't changed.
Wow.
Yeah. So it just like time flies, and I just really enjoyed it. So and then I think if you enjoy something, it helps you be better at it. And it was about a year and a half later, they made me a team manager, and then like the sky was the limit, really. I really loved it.
That's incredible. So you thought that you were going to go onto that path of being an academic and getting your PhD, and then you had to get this job, thanks to your mom.
Yes.
You went into that direction, and then you decided, wow, this is amazing. So, maybe this is the path for me. I'm not going to go back. And so did you break that news to your mom? Like, what did she say?
Oh, no, she was fine. She was funny because you couldn't understand that I was born in 1980 and she was born in 1950. And like, really, it was like success, inverted commas, is you have a degree from a good university, you're wearing a suit in a job in London. And like, doesn't matter what the job is, just like, as long as it looks successful, then everyone's happy. And it wasn't about if I was happy so much. It was just, are you doing all the things that look successful? And actually, so she hadn't got a problem with it at all. As long as I was just, stimulated and getting success, she was like, that looks good to me, And I want to be really clear, it wasn't plain sailing at all. It was really hard work, and there was an incredible amount of late nights. And my memory of the first weeks is sitting in bed at 11 o'clock at night with a big fat directory, like a Yellow Pages, but for industry, on my lap, and writing out leads, like the phone number, the name of the managing director, and like grinding lead generation, like writing them out. So I had enough leads to cold call throughout the next day, because you weren't allowed to sit on a computer and write out leads when it's prime pitching time. You had to be on the phone. And also, my desk was the side of my manager's desk. I didn't even have a desk. I was like, I had to use his computer at like lunch times to print off the leads. So it was hard. And that I may have got 2 deals in the first 2 weeks, but then I had 2 weeks when I blanked, and then I had another couple of deals and I blanked again. So I had a really good first quarter, relatively speaking, but I was starting to realize there's a lot of ups and downs. And money gets spent fast, and you realize that you've got to sales more than anything. People say it's mindset, but it's managing your emotions. What people don't really realize is it's not like every day you're going and just doing certain things. Every day you have to perform, like it's a performance. You have to show up with the right kind of attitude. Otherwise you can do all the things you're meant to do and still fail because you weren't like in the right state enough. And that's exhausting. And I found, at times I was like quite low, and I was like, why am I even doing this? And what's the point? But then you crack another bit of the code and you get a bit better. So it's definitely a really hard learning curve. Especially for someone who I say I'm naturally introverted. I really prefer like just my own company and that. And so after a day on the phones, I'd really need to like decompress,
Wow.
And I found that quite hard. So it was a very interesting dichotomy between Richard on the phone and then Richard immediately afterwards. So I was still a quiet, observant chap, but then I had to be this persona on the phone. But it was kind of nice because I could be whoever I wanted to be in the sense of my personality, because no one was watching me, other than the team. No one could see me on a Zoom call. It was just a phone call. And so it did help a bit with that kind of confidence.
So you had those 2 personalities, basically, the introverted Richard and the Richard who could be anyone he wanted on the phone with people. Yeah. How did you reconcile those 2 personalities? Because I would think that it could be exhausting, like maintaining the 2. And was there someone who acted as a mentor or helped you through this journey to become better at the sales?
Yeah, I think I kind of fused the 2, and I learned to turn it on when I needed to, and then dial it back back when I didn't, and so still be me when I was off of call, and just became, it's a weird thing. Performing to start with is foreign and weird, but then after a while it's just how you work. And it's weird because now if I get on a sales call, I just decide it's going to be a deal and I bring it on a certain level, and that's just what I've always done. And then you're no longer in that state because the call is finished. It's kind of a weird thing. But yeah, I had a lot of really wonderful mentors. The first manager was a very sensitive guy, and he was really good at picking up on nuance, and I really loved that. And then his boss was the opposite. His boss was like hardcore, like go. It was a bit Wolf of Wall Street almost.
Wow.
And but then my second manager was a kid who was a year older than me, but he was good at closing, and he taught me the value of saying the right thing at the right time and when to say nothing. That was really, really important. So I had Alex and Harry, and then there was then Antonio, who was this fiery Italian bull of a guy. He was my next manager, and everything Italian you can think of, like stereotypical, it was him. And then you add sales manager to that. It was kind of an amazing personality to observe, and he really taught me like ambition and pushing and pushing and pushing. And it's interesting that like a lot of people were like, isn't this really toxic? But for me at the time, like 24, I was like, it couldn't be more perfect, because he showed me what pushing myself and goal setting looked like. And I remember we all won, like we had a team of 4, and there was an incentive where like the top people in the company would go to Portugal. I think it was Faro we went to. And he said at the start of the quarter, just so you know, all 4 of us are going. What number will we need to go? We mapped to that. Go. And it was like, we just went, and no one else was thinking like that. But we're on a mission, and just that focus, and it gave us this kind of sense of brotherhood. It was really good to have. He's the guy who taught me the beginnings of nuance, little things like, right, someone's written us an email, you need to reply back, but how have they phrased it? Why did they choose that word? Really, people think it's overthinking, but it's that stuff. And he's like, you won't believe it, but like he'd say things like, because he'd listen in on calls with a special headset, he'd say, can you hear how they breathed at that point when they said this thing? And I love that there's all like that level of nerdery is fantastic. There's a lot about his management style that I didn't want to do, that rubbed me up the wrong way. But I, you know, as with anyone, good or bad, you have lessons from. I had many managers on the way up, and you know, some were brilliant, some were great coaches, others were like just inspiring but terrible managers. Some of them were like dodgy, and so you learn what not to do. But so some really great mentors. But the thing is, those early managers, they, like I, were on the job all day, every single day, doing not like there was no paperwork, there was no account management, there was no doing delivery for customers. The moment you get the sale, you never speak to them ever again. And so it was constantly focused on deal making. And so I really learned that craft just purely through massive exposure to it, and then very, you know, so much practice every single day. So I'm very thankful.
That's amazing. So I think it was 2018 where you decided to basically, was it that you leaped into entrepreneurship, or was it more leaping into LinkedIn and building a business on LinkedIn?
So I left, I handed in my notice at the beginning of 2014. I left the city. So I did basically 10 years in London, and then 10 and a half years ago, so it was January, like the first day back after New Year's in 2014, I left at the time. I was the sales director at a recruitment house, and I started on Facebook. And I basically remember Facebook. And so I started with like
Meta now.
I don't know. Imagine no LinkedIn. Like God, like life's a lot easier with that. But like Facebook then was, I would do a post and it wasn't that great, but I'd show up elsewhere, and you know. And I remember, you've got to remember, I've come from trying to cold call and speak to the CEO of probably 5 to 20 million quid company that I've never spoken to. No branding. There's just a cold call, and I have to, in half an hour, I have to get them to give me 8 grand.
Wow.
You know, it's hard. And moving from that to speaking to startup founders or entrepreneurs who are on their own, or coaches who were like, I'm on my own. And the thing I kept seeing was like, none of them had any money, like, and little has changed. Like none of them were making any money. And it was so fascinating because they wanted to speak to people and they wanted someone to hear them. But what they really wanted was to get some success. And I was like, why aren't you doing it this way? Why don't you do it that way? And so it was so crazy. You've got to remember the extremes here. Like from what I was doing, from people not wanting this unsolicited call, selling a thing that they wouldn't really could live without, to like, they really wanted to speak. So I was like, should we have a call then? And they were all over it. And so I just started selling some. I would sell. My first offering was every week you get 1 hour with me on a call, and I listen to you and I basically sales manage you and I tell you how to close stuff. And they loved it because they're like, I've got the idea and I'm even trying to promote myself, but like, I just need help with closing. So I started on Facebook. 2017, I was like, oh, LinkedIn looks interesting suddenly. And so then January 2018, I started the LinkedIn thing and soon stopped Facebook. So it'll be seven years at the beginning of next year that I've been doing it on here. And like suddenly it all clicked even more with LinkedIn because the context was there. And I said to someone recently, on Facebook, I felt I was competing against either loads of genetically superior coaches or marriage and birthday photos, and it just didn't feel as aligned. And of course then as years moved on, Facebook was like, if you dare do anything business related, you're going to need to pay for it now. And so there's a lot more, you know, paid posts, and I didn't feel it was aligned. So I binned it, and I binned Instagram soon after as well, because I found a similar thing. And then LinkedIn just worked straight away. The results were so much quicker. But it's just nice when people are so much more welcoming and the energy is better. And I just was like, this is so much easier compared to what I used to do. But it was nice.
What made you decide to leave, though, Richard, in 2014, your corporate job? Because it sounds like you've been moving up and up and up, and you're a director. Like, why didn't you decide to go all the way to, like, you know, VP and C-level, or continue, you know, working in the corporate world?
Yeah, in short, it was just, I just don't want to have a life in the city where, despite having tailored suits and nice watches and expensive things and, you know, 6-figure salary, I was working 80-hour weeks and I was exhausted and I wasn't happy. And I also was in recruitment, which was I was headhunted into that job. And it was, I remember my friend was like, it's not that you, I was like, I think it was 2010. I said to him, like, I've had it with selling now. I just want to do something else.
Yeah.
And he said, you haven't had it with selling. You've had it with this kind of selling. You need to do something new. And I was like, you're probably right, actually. And it's the same. But everyone who says I hate sales, they don't mean that. They mean that they hate selling in the way they currently sell. When you sell in the way you love, you tend to enjoy it. But I moved to that, and I was just like, it was always a bit of a struggle, because I went in at head of sales level, and they were like, really? This guy's never sold any recruitment ever. He's now our head of sales. So I had to be like, I'll just show you then. So I had to close stuff to show them what, you know, to build some respect. But I just didn't really have that as much of a love for it. So in 2012, I had really hard things happen to me in my personal life. So my daughter was born without an esophagus. So she had no food pipe at all. We had to like go for lots of surgery, and that was very, very difficult. You know, she was a very sickly child and almost died a lot. But at the same year, my mother passed away from cancer as well. So you can imagine the implosion, plus this very hard job. And of course, one of the reasons why I was working so many hours was because I was distracting myself, because you have weird logic when you're going through bad stuff. Like, perhaps if I just work more, that's a good idea. And of course, you end up really messed up. So 2013, after this horrible year, you get that kind of that aftershock of it all. And it was in a very, very dark place, and had to be signed off work, and a lot of very bad things happening to me in my head. And so I kind of started coming to the end of 2013, and I was like, this can't be it. This can't be what I do. for the rest of my life. I'm not happy. And, you know, and it was difficult because people close to me were like, you don't get to choose. You're a dad. Your wife no longer works. You have a child. You have responsibility. You have to stick with what you're doing. And I'm like, I don't want to subscribe to that. So I'm going to go and make it happen. And so there was a lot of motivation, despite me being quite low and flat and beaten up by the world. There was motivation is perhaps the wrong word. There was a certain level of pressure and need to deliver. And it took a few months, but, you know, then I started getting results. And, you know, when things are rubbish, you need to take stock and say, like, is this really what I'm going to do for like the next 30 years or so? And choose you, basically, rather than making sure everyone else is all right. And it was a big step back, but then it's become multiple steps forward in the years that followed.
It paid off. And
Yeah.
my big question for you is, how did you channel all of that pain into starting the LinkedIn Client Accelerator program? Because I feel that a lot of this is part of your why, in terms of why you enjoy so much empowering coaches, consultants, and entrepreneur to harness the power of LinkedIn and grow their business.
Yeah, I think you can see the thread here. There's always been teaching in my life. If not my parents, then what I wanted to do after university, and then I became a sales manager, and then now I'm teaching. You know, so I'm finding I can be a student and a teacher anyway. But I think the pain was there for the first few years here. You know, in my running my own company, it wasn't like, right, grit your teeth, let's go get it. It was like, still, I was really delicate after all these rubbish things that had happened. There was a lot of crying, you know, and a huge amount of therapy and things like that. But then I remember I got to a point where I was like, I'm making all right money now. I'm really getting there. But I need more, and I need it to be a step change. And really, there was a coach who started really helping me. I just needed help with ideating a product. Because I was doing all this coaching and all this consulting in the city and training and stuff. And I was like, it's all me. The bandwidth is so used up on me being there, and all my time being used up. And so what I need is something more scalable. And he was like, there's a model you could use where basically you teach each week, and you get people bought into that. You do a course as well. And so in early 2020, we started building it. I spent 2 months like hard. It was like, that was like my PhD, that 2 months building the 8 modules, all the worksheets. It took so much work. I remember I did the stats. It was something like 35,000 words of the scripts that I used to build the thing. But I loved it because the guy was like, when you do it properly, it will feel premium. And when it feels premium and they realize it is, they'll pay for it. And it just was a good idea. So I knew I could sell it, but I just wanted a flagship product. And that's how he put it. It was like, if you have a flagship product like this, you can then dial down all of this running around coaching and consulting. And it just really helped me a lot. And then, and I started in 2020, and now it's 2024, and it's been going 4.5 years. So I'm really proud of that. And like 200 businesses have gone through it, and it's just been great fun teaching and helping people there. So yeah, it all threads together if you look backwards, of course.
Yes, and there are a few lessons coming out of this. Well, the first one is obviously the grit, but I think the big lesson that I know is going to apply to everyone in here, whether you're a business owner, a career transitioner, professional, etc., is that point that you shared what your friends said to you. You thought that it was sales that you didn't enjoy, and you were ready to just go a completely opposite direction, but you got a lot of wisdom from people helping you understand that it's not that it's the actual, nature of the work that you didn't enjoy, but just maybe the setting, sometimes we fall into this trap where we want to just completely burn our business down when we're not enjoying it. And sometimes it's just a matter of, maybe you just need to tweak the business model. Maybe you just need to change one thing. Maybe it's just the people that you're targeting. But you don't have to start over, and you don't have to feel like you have to throw away everything that you've learned and you've invested in.
You have to listen to yourself and the market's response and iterate instead, or evolve. And, you know, rather than throwing it all away because I didn't really get on as well as I might say with Facebook, I pivoted to LinkedIn, and LinkedIn seemed, it was like, it's not the grass is greener. It's just way more logical that I'm there. So let's try that. And obviously there was a bit of overlap, and then it really worked. And that's exactly right. And originally, you know, my strap line right at the start was I help startups. That was it. I was just doing startups, and I ran like a live stream every Monday for 5 years. So 260 episodes of startup Q&A on Facebook and Instagram and that. And it was all startups. But actually, the reason why they liked the help I gave wasn't because it was holistic on startups. It was clear everything, let's go get some clients. And that seemed to help them quite a bit. And so it's an interesting one, how we evolve. And now it's like, it's really about conversion. And it's been a few years where it's been with a LinkedIn twist, but now my gentle pivot, because it needs to be, through this year and certainly through next year, is away from the LinkedIn focused selling and conversion to selling and conversion. The last thing I want, not that it's a bad thing, is to be seen as a LinkedIn coach, because I'm not. I'm really good at LinkedIn because I have converted a lot from it, but I'm not a LinkedIn trainer. I'm a conversion and sales trainer, and LinkedIn happens to be my device. So I'm just moving away from that with the art of sell proposition, and it's nice to keep evolving as the years go on, you know?
Well, if I may, since I'm one of your students, I honestly see you not just as a sales mentor. I think you are the king of positioning, because you have this way. I almost feel like it goes back to that moment where you sat down with that teacher because you had that anxiety.
Yeah.
And I feel you're able to relate to that, being someone who naturally, you know, is introverted or was introverted. You can identify that people lack confidence, and that's standing in their way. And I feel like that is probably 80% of why people don't close or don't sell or are not able to create that, let's call it, leadership presence that will get someone to respect them enough and see them as an expert. And you have a gift of helping people understand that, because you went through so many hardships, you went through so many pivots, you came from a non-traditional career trajectory, and you can sense when people are getting in their own way. And I know that, you know, I've had so many conversations with you where you basically just said it to me and said, the problem is not that you don't know what you're talking about. The problem is how you're coming across, and you need to watch that, because not everyone knows everything about you. They'll just see you from the outside. And so I think
it's a really important insight. It really is an important insight, because, and you're right, you know, it's actually quite accurate. I'd say probably 80% of people
have to be the teacher this time.
No, but you're right, because about 80% of people tend to have this imposter syndrome thing.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of fear about, will it not work out? Because often the stakes are quite high for them. It's like, I left work knowing I'm good at a thing and I want this to work. And if not, I have to go back, and I don't want that. Or people are relying on me and so on. And I think what's really valuable isn't just recognizing that someone might be nervous or lack confidence in technique, for instance. It's showing them a way that appreciates that fact. So here's language or an approach or technique that gets you the outcome you're after, without making you have to be a different person altogether. I remember I pulled into a workshop. It was like a 3-day workshop I ran for a business in London. And it was there was a community within this business that was like, they wanted help with confidence. And they're like, we all know what we're doing. We even know what to say if we're super confident people. What we don't know is how we would phrase it to feel comfortable and yet still get a result. And so working with people in, firstly, wording and delivery that suits them, that they are like, do you know what? I feel comfortable saying it that way. But also that recognizes, and this is what really makes the difference, helps them recognize the state of the person that or the organization they're interacting with. So really, people love to talk about how much EQ they've got and like that, oh, I've got great empathy, but often people don't, especially in interaction and communication. I'm building a new course with LinkedIn. I'll be in LA in a couple of months' time to shoot it. And it's on this specifically. It's about understanding that how you want to communicate with someone disregards how they would like to receive you. And the way I put it often when it comes to selling is you shouldn't sell how you want to sell, because how you want to sell is, hi, buy my stuff. And they're like, oh, yes, please. What we need to do is sell how they want to buy. And when we get that right, what happens is that the person we're interacting with, selling an idea or a notion or, of course, a proposition, when we meet them where they are and bring, like, show an awareness that they're not that hot right now, they're like quite cold, in fact. And so you have to work through a process that takes them from where they are and nurtures them to a better state to buy. It gives you so much more power, and people love that because they recognize, I think, a lot of what these teachings look like, because those nuances are in everyday life anyway. And I just think that it's all too direct and transactional usually, and it doesn't work because they're all sick of it, which is why people hate sales, which is what we talked about right at the start of this. It's because they hate the rejection of being an irritant. And of course you're going to be rejected if you're an irritant, but it doesn't mean that's the only way you do it. You find a different way that's much more appropriate for, again, the state of that person. And I think a lot of people love the like understanding the workings of that kind of behavioral interaction and like the dance you do, especially because it's fulfilling not just for the buyer, but it's fulfilling for the seller. And you end up then with the outcome you're after. But more importantly, you end up with a buyer saying, I'm happy to buy this. I'm really looking forward to it. You know, I did a sale this morning and we're both absolutely thrilled to be working together. It felt like an aligned fit. We connected really well. We went from 0 in the hour to deal, let's go. And we're excited about like this whole thing happening together. And that's what you need, rather than, okay, well, I got some money, and them thinking, okay, well, I'll give it a punt. It needs to be instead, I can't believe that this is such a perfect fit and I feel aligned. And of course there's money. That's how it is. That's incidental. But the journey together is something I'm really looking forward to. So I just enjoy that. And I think a lot of people deep down enjoy learning that about themselves.
Awesome. I know we have a couple of minutes left, and you've been already very generous with your time. So first of all, I think we're lucky to have you here as someone who gets invited to speak at Oxford and Warwick and work with, top tier brands like Sony and Deloitte. So thank you so much for being here. And I wanted to just spend a couple of minutes to basically share with people, first of all, what is the best way to reach out to you if they need help with sales? What type of, folks do you work with? And what is next for you? What are you excited about? I know there's the Art of Selling community. By the way, guys, I'm part of that community. It's amazing. You should check it out. Give Richard a follow, and he has it on his LinkedIn profile. But I want you to tell us what is next for you, and how can people reach out to you?
Yeah, so if you go to therichardmoore.com, you can see information on the accelerator and working with me and so on. And that's all there. Of course, there's the LinkedIn profile as well. And the Art of Sell, I don't release a new product every 5 minutes. I do it with a lot of consideration and make sure there's good fit, because I'm going to commit to it and it will work. So I need to spend time building things properly. And that's what we've done in the last couple of months. The team and I have released The Art of Sell, which is masterclasses with like real best-in-class people, people who work with Nike, Netflix, Spotify, Accenture, Vogue, the Emmys, the list goes on. And I wanted to, rather than just a bunch of Richard's cute friends from LinkedIn. I wanted it to be best in class speakers who actually have been there and done it. And in fact, a lot of them aren't speakers. They're just epic at a thing they've done. And they're coming to talk about that case study. We had someone recently who ran LinkedIn and branding for Alex Hormozi. And he spoke, and he's not a speaker as such, but he knows his stuff. And so having speakers like that, it gives me an opportunity to be a student yet again. And I love it. So if anyone wants to learn about Art of Sell, that's the featured link on my profile. And I'm excited, Nada, because as we grow every month on that, as we bring in new cohorts of people, I get to meet new people and do some workshops with them as well. But I'm thrilled because it's something that will really move to being a proposition far bigger than me, which is really what I wanted. I don't want everything to be the Richard Moore show, which requires me to be present, as we have in the accelerator, which is fine. That's what it needs to be. But, you know, it can be it's already an incredible community, and it's so giving. And I have to shout out the team, you know, Kiki, Miles, Alex, and certainly Vita, who's head of community. They do such a good job there. But I'm excited about the future because there's designs on the other social channels that will roll out based on all these talks. So the YouTube channel's in budget for later this year, next year even, all the way through to the in-person events. So we'll have a London one and then the East and West Coast ones as well. And lots of fun things. And I've got yet more hires to be doing in 2025. So I'm really excited about it blossoming into something rather than only growing within the confines of what I as an individual could do. It's nice to focus on my bit and let the team help grow this to be much bigger. So it's just great fun. And, you know, I'm having a wonderful time being like geeking out over it all every single day with everyone.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Richard. And I will end with my favorite part of the community is definitely practicing your sales pitch. I have never seen any community that actually allows you to do that, gives you the opportunity to do that, and in such a small group, get feedback, because that can definitely be scary. And, you know, not just from a B2C perspective, but also from a B2B perspective.
Definitely.
So thank you so much, Richard. I love your story, and I hope that everyone here had a good time and is not as fearful of sales. And if you are still fearful, then again, you know, just join, for God's sake, Richard's community, because, you know, maybe you need that, you know, support and energy from others. All right. Awesome. Everyone, thank you so much. I'm going to end the stream. Okay.